I'm apparently mic'd up, so this should hopefully work and you should hopefully be able to hear me. First of all, I'll say that I am a big data guy in terms of I run big data teams. If you want a discussion about random forests and what's best, I'm not your man. But what this is, I'm going to try and talk you through what I think the biggest problems are around what we're trying to do as an industry just now and what we're trying to do with the technology. Hopefully some of it resonates. I'm happy to take questions at the end, or if I'm saying something that's absolute nonsense, can someone just put their hand up and say, you're talking pish, and we'll deal with it that way. That would be best for me. So my name is Martin Thorn. I work for Clydesdale and Yorkshire Bank. I've been there 6 months. The last 10 years of my life prior to that, I was at Sky, and then before that, Scottish Power, various different things. So most of my experience, most of the stuff we're doing at Clydesdale at the moment is NDA'd, unfortunately, especially as we're standing in JP Morgan's office, which is a wee bit awkward for me. So most of the stuff we're going to talk about is not necessarily what we're working on just now, but just general concepts and general themes. But any questions, please give me a shout. So specifically, when you talk about what could machine learning do, there is no end to the possibilities. When we're talking internally in my team, with my data scientists, my data engineers, what could we do? I mean, we could fix the credit models that are all SaaS-based. We could make them so much better. We could go and we can look at making proper predictive models for your online bank account. Our B account has a predictor that says how much money you're going to have at the end of the month. It doesn't work very well. We can make that so much better. We can go and have a look at fraud cases, anti-money laundering. The use cases in financial services are massive. There is no end to the possibilities you can do. We are not limited of good ideas. We're not limited in funding in terms of people saying, I'll pay for you to do this. That's not the problem. The problem for me is a huge problem. And some of you might know this, some of you might have experienced this before, but the biggest problem is Derek, right? There is a Derek in every single company I've worked for. Derek is not a director. Derek is not to the owner of the company. Derek is not very junior. Derek is senior enough to make our lives really, really hard, but not so senior that you can actually say no to something. But he's the guy that's going to make things really grind to a halt. And I'm afraid to say, it's always a guy, and he's always white middle class, I'm afraid to say, and he's always been there a very, very long time. So Derek's going to come up through this presentation. Some of it might resonate, some of it might be nonsense. You might be fortunate enough to work for a company that has no Dereks, and if you do, please let me know. I'll come and join you. We'll have some fun together. So why isn't Derek on side? This is the most exciting thing that's happened. We're actually starting to make a difference. We can actually, the computing power, now that you start to move to Amazon and these sorts of, I tried to make a Cloudera cluster work on premise about 3 years ago, and it was really, really hard. Once you start moving to AWS, suddenly the whole concept of infinitely spinning stuff up, spinning it down, capacity, we're at this great juncture where you can actually make a difference. So what's going wrong with Derek? Well, the problem is Derek's been oversold to a lot. Derek's been in his role a lot, and he's had shiny shoes salespeople come and tell him that this will fix his problem, this is what he needs. He's heard it, he's been there, he's seen it. Derek doesn't like process changes, especially if Derek works for a bank, because it takes 2 years to get those processes agreed. And that's a real problem for Derek. It took us 2 years to get here. I don't want to change it, I don't want to do it again. Derek's also thinking, well, hold on, if this new machine learning stuff comes along, am I wrong? Am I going to lose my job? Is the computer going to replace me in a proper kind of Luddite? He's also talking about trust. Do we trust the computer? I trust Dave, because Dave's been here for years, and I know that Dave knows what he's doing, and I trust Dave, but this computer, I'm not sure about it. Derek's also watched Terminator an awful lot, and Derek knows what can go wrong when AI happens. And then Derek hears a quote from Elon Musk that says that AI is going to be the absolute death of society, and he goes, that guy really knows what he's talking about, and he thinks AI is terrible. And I think there's a link between machine learning and AI. It's all the same stuff, it doesn't matter. He's also heard about killer cars, so there's Teslas killing people, there's Ubers killing people. This is ridiculous, it's out of control. And he watched that Black Mirror with the robot dogs, the dogs that got really stabby. And he was really scared by that, because then he watched the Boston Robotics video, which looked like the actual dog. And as a brief aside, I don't know if any of you know this, but there was an interview with Charlie, who wrote Black Mirror, wrote most of it. And at the end of that Metalhead episode, the original kind of screenplay, once all the massacre had happened, it was then meant to go to a drone operator who then shut down his terminal and went off to bath his kids. but he didn't want to show that because he wanted it to be, was it somebody controlling it? Was it true AI? He wanted it to be left open. I actually think that would have been a brilliant ending just to show how, just ridiculous the human race has become, that you can just go killing people like it's a game. But anyway, so Derek's not on side. So you need to remember that. Derek doesn't want this to work. So let's go through some of the things and some of the problems that Derek's had, and I'll bring in some of my experience, which hopefully chimes. This will revolutionize your business. I get pitched every single day by somebody telling me that they're going to revolutionize the business. Again, I'm senior enough that people think they can pitch me because they think I've got money. They're wrong, I don't. But I'm junior enough that I actually have the time to speak to these people. I don't have a PA protecting me, etc. So I get this pitch all the time. So does Derek. We're only going to get one shot at this. A company I spent quite a long time at, is that vague enough to not get sued? Whenever they did anything, always went for the moonshot. They always wanted to do, well, if we're going to go to all the effort of changing it, we may as well make a massive difference. Let's do it properly. That then becomes a 2-3 year project and you just get caught up in it. Everyone else is doing it. You've all heard the big data teenage sex analogy, which I won't give you because it's at every big data conference. There's a real fear that everyone else is running ahead. I have a sneaking suspicion that they're not, and I have a sneaking suspicion that lots of people are playing at this, but there's not many people actually getting really good machine learning into production, but that's just my gut feeling. Again, somebody can tell me that I'm wrong on that. But everyone's overselling this. We need to do it, we need to do it. I was involved in a big project, which isn't specifically machine learning, but I think it's a really good, I think there's a lot of similarities. The company I worked for got a ridiculous amount of calls a week, like 1 million calls a week, and they decided that we're going to move from voice to chat. Now, if you're getting 1 million calls a week and you do the maths to say, let's say every call costs you £3, that gets quite expensive really, really quickly. So if you said to somebody, right, what we're going to do is we're going to take 0.5% of your calls and we're going to move them to chat and chatbots. Well, a business case writes itself. That's hundreds of £1,000s a year, job done. For reasons I've not yet established, the company I worked for decided that they were going to go for 30% movement from voice to chat in 6 months. And that's what the business case was based on. The entire business case, we went out, we bought the tool, we did the investment, we did everything. And the reality is, to try and get people to change channel, you've picked up the phone because you want something fixed. Oh, I'll move you to chat. Oh, no, if I wanted to chat, I would have chatted. I would have had, to get people to change channel is really, really hard. So what we tried to do was we scaled it way too fast. Customers got really upset, and then we started to make ridiculous decisions to try and hit the business case numbers. And when you try and go for the short-term business case numbers, that then means that long-term customer satisfaction, customers just going, I'm not interested. And it got so ridiculous that we actually took the messaging out of the app. And if you think about it, customers got your app open, so they've A, downloaded your app, which is an incredible in itself. Then they go into the app and they want to have a conversation about their account. They're in the right channel. You've got them. If you make that a great experience, they'll never pick up the phone. But no, we decided that customers were contacting us about spurious reasons, so we switched it off and tried to divert more people from voice to channel. So it's not a machine learning, it's not a data example, but it's a really good example of what happens when you nail yourself to this is what we need to hit these numbers. If you need to hit those numbers, it might not work because you've got to experiment, you've got to fail. I often say that people love the concept of failing fast as long as you don't fail. And I think that's a lot of what we're experiencing at the moment is nobody lets you try it, and definitely nobody will let you try it if you've just spent 3 million quid on a new toy. So that's overselling. If we look at trust, trust me, I've got an algorithm that just works all that out for you. Number one, business people don't understand the word algorithm and they're scared of it. They will never admit that. But I did a presentation I work for a team called Data and Decisioning, which is about 600 strong. So they all work with old school ETL, my team, basically they're all in data and decisioning. I put up a definition, a really easy definition of algorithm, and I've had so many people coming up to me afterwards going, thank you for that. I was really scared because I didn't know what it meant. Because nobody wants to stick their hand up. But see, when you're saying, trust me, the algorithm works it all out, I wrote something called first time resolution. Again, not necessarily machine learning, it was just compute SQL that basically looked at every customer that called in, the agent they spoke to, and whether that customer phoned back within 7 days. So really, really super simple. You then had a metric, first time resolution for every single agent. Assuming you're comparing one agent to another agent that gets the same type of calls, you would imagine that their first time resolution would be about the same. The maths is solid. It doesn't change. If you're comparing a broadband agent, may have inadvertently given away the company. If you're comparing an agent that deals with a help desk call versus an agent that deals with a sales call, well, that's apples and pears. That's not going to work. But what we found was that we had some agents that had 80% first time resolution and some that had 50. And when we were speaking to people and saying, well, here's the maths, I'll talk you through the maths. No, can't be right, can't be right. There's no way that guy gets 50%. It's wrong. It got to the extent that we had to supply a list of account numbers to say, this is the accounts you spoke to and here are all the ones that phoned back. And then the agents would then go through the CRM platform and verify that the algorithm was right. And all it would take would be one where it was, oh, that wasn't really my call, I transferred that. Now again, as far as maths is concerned, I don't care whether you transferred it or not, it doesn't matter, that all balances itself out. All it would take would be one wrongly categorized one, algorithm's toast. Don't care, don't trust it. We eventually had to abandon it. They couldn't make it work. 23rd of March 2018. That's the day that somebody got killed in a Tesla in autonomous driving mode. The reason I know about that is because it was worldwide news. 40,000 people get killed every year in the States in car crashes. One person got killed in California in a Tesla and it was worldwide news. Uber, the autonomous Volvo with Uber technology on it, knocked somebody off their bike and killed it. I'm not saying killing people is good, clearly. Anyone who dies is clearly a horrific thing, and if your family, I even think about my son, I just get choked up, I can't deal with it. But we need to get it in context. People don't trust the technology because everybody remembers, well, that's the car that killed somebody. And then you get to this really interesting system and you go, right, I'm guessing we're all techies here, right? Do we trust the technology? Like, do we really trust the technology? I'm middle-aged, right? I have a young child. I've bought a Volvo 4 before. It's about as cliched as it gets. The only thing more cliched is, in a week I'm going to Centre Parks, right? So it's so embarrassingly middle-class cliched, it's just not true. My flash Volvo has got radar cruise control. So what that means is, if you're not a car person, it'll keep a certain distance from the car in front. But it only looks so far ahead. I used to drive for the M8 every day. And what happens is, you can see brake lights ahead of you, but the car can't yet. So it's accelerating hard towards some brake lights. There isn't a single person on earth who wouldn't hover over the brake pedal. Everybody would do it. Now the car catches it every single time and brakes to a standstill quite violently, but it does it. It copes. But every single time, I've done about 30,000 miles in that car, and every single time I'm over the brake pedal because you're like, oh, I don't quite trust it. If this then that, most of you, if not used it, be aware of it. Every applet you create has a little tab that says, do you want to get notified every time it runs? Why do I want to get, logically, you don't need to get notified because it runs, so it did something. So I have geeky wireless light bulbs that switch, I've now got it that switch on when it gets dark, right? Which is ridiculous and it's not essential, but they notify me every time they've done it. Now it doesn't matter when I'm in my house because I can see they've come on. But just if I was out, it's really nice to know that they've switched on. I don't trust if this then that. If I don't trust it, and you guys don't trust it, well, there's something wrong. I can't be alone in this. Hopefully somebody after this will say, do you know, I don't trust it either, and I've got all these notifications that I just dismiss. But if we don't trust it, how does Derek trust it? Like, Derek thinks it's the Antichrist, so Derek really doesn't trust it. So that's trust. If we then talk about change, can you have a revolution without changing things? I don't think you can. If you want to be truly revolutionary, you need to change something. Evolution, maybe we can have a different argument, but if you want to do something revolutionary, you need to change. Meaningful change is never, ever easy. Ask somebody who decided to join a gym or took up cycling or decided to eat healthily or stop drinking or stop smoking. We can all comfortably say, yeah, they're all quite hard. But in business, people forget and go, oh no, but change is easy. Change isn't easy. Humans are not really good at changing. People like process. People in banks love process. People who've been in a job a long time really like process as well. I'm quite old, so some of you, if anyone moved from The old kind of when you stored one number per SIM, like one number per person per SIM, and then you move to a smartphone, suddenly you've got, oh, I've got a contact list with 5 phone numbers, whereas you used to have 5 different contacts with the same person, and you have to transfer it across. Or when you go from a paper diary to an electronic diary, or like I've just had to do when you go from Outlook to Lotus Notes, people still use that? You know, it's really hard to get your head around, oh, I can't do this, I have to change, but you have to change the way you're doing things. I've just bought an Apple Pencil, not because I like Apple, but because I'm forced to use iOS products, so why not? And it's actually a really good bit of kit, but again, you have to change the way you use things because, well, I can't use Evernote anymore, I've got to use OneNote, blah, 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 blah. The benefits are there in spades, but I need to change the way that I do things, otherwise I'm not going to get the benefits. The chat example I talked about earlier on, when they were deciding who was going to run the project to put chat into the contact centres, they picked the person that looked after the voice channel. So guess what chat ended up looking like? It looked like voice, but on a different medium. And that's not the way it works. That's not where you're going to get the best benefit of technology. They ended up having 70 different skill sets in chat. So chat's not real time. You can take some time. It was over Messenger and text. So you can then have multi-skilled agents having a blether and working it out. But no, this is the model that works in phone. We're going to put that in chat. Because people don't like change because that's how it works. We had a person who was on chat, and I swear to God, he was a 2-finger typist. How is that going to work? You know, and I'm all for inclusion, and I'm all for, let's see if we can make it work. But if you're trying to hit a business case that says you're 3 and 4 times more effective than voice, somebody going, that's just not going to cut it. Change needs to be painful, otherwise it's not change. It's unflattering, so we come back to Derek again. Somebody says this is going to make us 10 times more productive. And what Derek says is, sorry, you're telling me that we're not productive. We've optimized this workflow. We've been through this 100 times. It can't get any more efficient. It's perfect. There's no way a computer can make this better. I know a good employee when I see one. I know it's all working fine. Yeah, we've got our problems, but it's good. The first-time resolution example I gave you before, we found an agent who had a 50% first-time resolution when all his peers were in 80%. And I kept asking the question, what's wrong with this guy? Why has he got such a bad first-time resolution score? This guy was amazing. Honestly, he was the Mother Teresa of agents. He was absolutely flawless in the eyes of his manager. He was the most technically qualified. He'd been through the most training courses. He'd been there the longest. He was incredible. Right up until an objective person listened to his calls. And he was the comic book guy from The Simpsons in IT support help desk form. He was horribly patronising, he was misogynistic, and what he loved more than anything else was patronisingly explaining to somebody why it didn't work like that. And it wasn't the internet that was broken, madam, it's your iPad. And I get that, I get it's frustrating. We've all got parents who we're IT support for. Sometimes you just want to say those things back. He was a horrible individual. So what happened was, people went, oh great, it's working, thanks very much, hung up, and then phoned back and got somebody else. That's why his first-time resolution score was so bad, because he wasn't resolving the customer's issues. But the sheep dip training methodology that they had was, there is no such thing as a bad agent. We'll just keep training them, they'll get better, they'll get better, they'll get better, they'll get better. The concept that the machine is saying that the person you've been holding up as a shining example is actually a bit rubbish, that's pretty tough. And I'm a wee bit NDA'd, but can you be a wee bit NDA'd? NDA'd must be pretty binary, you'd have thought. But anyway, we've just rolled something out where we're helping our relationship managers. So relationship managers look after 600 customers, and we've basically said, these are the customers you should be concerned about. And what it's come back, we weren't expecting. The manager was expecting it to be evenly distributed across all the relationship managers. And shock horror, it's not. Some have got more people they should be concerned about than others. And the instant response we got back was, so you're saying this is a bad guy? You're saying he's not good at his job? Well, no, we're just saying the data says you should be concerned about these people. We're not judging, we're just saying the data says you should be concerned. But that's the problem. Every time Derek hears that, Derek hears, oh, the computer's saying I'm wrong. this is all exceptionally depressing, right? This is really sexy technology. Data has never been sexier. Some of it's Cambridge Analytica's fault, but at least my mum knows what I do for a living now, thanks to Cambridge Analytica, so we've got to be happy about that. Albeit I try and say it's not quite that evil. And really, were they being evil? Well, who knows? We can have that conversation a different day. I'm really sorry it's depressing, but the reality is, it is quite tough to get this stuff into production. The algorithms, the really cute stuff, the stuff that you guys are brilliant at is fantastic. To get it to the next level is tough. So I'm sorry again. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be really, really frustrating. And I'm sorry. So, for what it's worth, as more of a business guy than a techie, have I got any top tips? Start really, really, really small. And that's my biggest tip, and that's the thing that we're actually making work in Clydesdale. And that's the only Clydesdale reference I'll really give you, but that's what's making it work in Clydesdale. We're starting small. And find someone you can trust. You need someone in the business who's going to champion this, because if it's just left to the techies, all the business people go, cone heads, not listening to them, not interested. Another one of their rants. You need someone in the business who's going to buy into it, and you need someone in the business who's going to take a bit of a risk on you. If you don't have that, it's not going to work. Algorithms aren't sexy, guys. I think they're quite cool. Business people don't understand them. We did, my other Clydesdale reference, we did a discretionary spend algorithm, which I think is just amazing. It's not rocket science, clustering transactions and predicting how much money someone's going to have in their bank account, right? It's the sort of stuff that if you were a bank, you'd go, what, you mean you don't do that already? That's insane. But banks don't seem to, so that's cool. It's an opportunity for us. We pitched it all around the business. Nobody was interested. Absolutely zero people were interested, right up until we put a shiny front end over it. We put a shiny front end over it with a slider, and we let people play about with, I'll spend 20% less on gambling and 40% more on this, and I'll have that, man. Oh, that's interesting. Everybody wanted to play with it, and I mean everybody. We've now got 2 use cases fighting to get it into production first. The algorithm hasn't changed a single bit. My data scientist is absolutely appalled to his very core because the shiny front end took half an hour at best. And that's the bit that people are excited about. And it's horrible, but you just have to suck it up and go, algorithms aren't sexy. Don't ask for 100K, ask for 10. Again, I don't know where you work at the moment, but £10,000 is small change for most big companies. £10,000 is maybe 4 weeks work for a sprint, 2 weeks work for a sprint, depending on how big they are. I can get £10,000. You don't need to raise a business case for it. You just go and find your friend in the business and say, gonna go and give me 10 grand. We'll journal it out. We'll do it however you do it. And I'll have a play for 3 or 4 weeks and we'll see what we come up with. You can get that. If you do lots and lots and lots of tiny experiments, some of them will stick, most of them will not. But if you're only spending 3, 4, 5, 10 grand every time, nobody cares. You burn 2 million quid and don't deliver, someone's going to get very, very upset. You're burning 5, 10 grand, but you're advancing all the time. Some of our best algorithms, we've started out with a concept or a hypothesis that we're going to do this, and suddenly we end up that this is what's, the discretionary spend came out of something completely different that we were playing around with, and that's the one that's gained traction. Worst case, build it out of hours. I'm a car guy. A lot of the German car companies and a lot of the Japanese car companies have out-of-hours engineers clubs where they basically get together and just hack stuff together. The cars don't always look great, but as a car enthusiast, there's quite a few really good examples where it's stuff that the marketing department haven't pushed, it hasn't been on a plan, it's just been engineers getting together going, what could we do if we shoehorned that engine into that car? That would be quite cool, wouldn't it? And then they go and do it and they try it. And this is my final thing. Dumb in production is worth 1,000,000 times more than intelligent and sexy sitting on your laptop. If it's not in production, I don't care how interesting it is, it's not worth as much. You need to get it into production, otherwise it just becomes an academic exercise in navel gazing. If you can get something pretty dumb, if you can lower your expectations and say, let's get something into production that people go, so tell me more about this machine learning, tell me more about these algorithms, tell me more about how this works. The next one you do will be a bit smarter, and again, and again, and again, and again. If you shoot for the stars, you might get there, and if you work for a company that lets you get there, fantastic. If it's a company with Derek in it, Derek's more likely to not notice you putting the dumb stuff in because the dumb stuff's not as scary to him. Build your credibility, build it up, and take it from there. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening. And questions, I guess.
Amazing, Mark. Thanks very much. So, do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi.
Using your terminology, we've got business people and we've got cone heads.
Yes, that's deliberately.
Where does the CDO sit in that?
Can you repeat the question?
So I've said that you've either got business people or you've got cone heads. Where does the CEO sit? I think
CDO.
CTO. Data officer. That's a really interesting question. So I'm more on the business side than the technical side, and I think that's where a lot of the I'm going to say this. I'm biased, but the really core technical skills, there's a risk that they're becoming commodity, and you're always going to get, so the more stuff moves offshore, the more people come through the data science universities, etc., the more people who are coming out with a lot of the data lab courses, we're seeing more people coming out with R and Python skills than we've ever seen before. There's always going to be a brilliant appetite for the proper unicorns, the people that can do Python and can speak to business people without terrifying them. Amazing, I'll hire 5 of them, let's do that. Unfortunately, I think as we start to commoditize a lot of these technologies and commoditize a lot of these skill sets, I think the CDO needs to be more on the business side, or at least be able to fake it on the business side and be that accessible. That, if you look at my LinkedIn, it says demystifying AI and MI. Literally most of my day is spent walking around to people and going, it's not that scary, it's not that complicated, it's actually quite stupid. Now my data scientists hate me saying that, but that's what we need to do to get it over the line. So I think if you're a highly technical CDO and you've got a gift for speaking to people, amazing. If you've got a gift for articulating the problem, fantastic. In my experience, that's a really rare combination. And I think the talent is going to come with the translators, as I call them. So that's the technical business people who can sit between the two functions and say, okay, right, I hear what you're saying, right, I'll translate it back. For years, I've been jack of all trades, master of none. I'm just hoping this comes off and I've actually got a career. So yeah, that's the plan. If it doesn't work, then who knows? Does that answer your question?
It's an answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is one answer, and it'll work for different companies, and it's how my board are very passionate about technology, but they don't understand the technology. So David Duffy's now a fintech advisor to the north of England, which is fantastic. He really loves the technology, but he doesn't understand machine learning, for example. He doesn't understand any of the stuff that we're up to, but he thinks it's fantastic. That's great, but I still need to explain it to him, if that makes sense.
I was really interested in your ask for like £10,000 at a time and making small measured progress that you can demonstrate to justify more investment. What sort of breakthrough have you seen in kind of, there's still the demand to train algorithms which can be disproportionately cost to actually demonstrate results? Have you?
We're not that far along the journey, to be honest, that we've got what we've had success in is actually the concept of a prototype. So the discretionary spend is built on one customer. So that's the way we've approached it, is basically let's build a model based on one customer and then go out to the business and say this is what we've done, with the view that if you want to get this into production, here's a rough timeline of what we need to do. That's been difficult for my bank in particular, because my bank likes certainty and they like to know how much and how long. So if I say yes, how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take to do? And the answer for both is, I don't know. And that doesn't go down very well. But the flip side of it is, I've only burnt 10 grand. So if you want me to get architects and engineers and InfoSec and everybody involved now to work out that, my £10,000 experiment becomes 100 grand. So I think for me, the training of the algorithm is the icing on the cake. I think if you can actually say, let's get it into production, and before you get to unsupervised learning, supervised, whatever it needs to be, I think if you can improve, I can't tell you the numbers, which is annoying but understandable, but we purchase systems that we've managed to absolutely destroy in terms of accuracy in 4 weeks. And the bank have been purchasing these systems for decades from these, industry leading, and we just use a little bit of, let's face it, math skills, and we've been able to go, well, that looks like that, so we reckon that these are all looky-likeys, bosh. And for me, it's all about starting small. And once you start to see the benefits come through, the example I'm talking about, we got 10 grand for an experiment. We're now 50 grand to basically production ready the code and start to do full scale trials. So basically the code is written and works, but it would never be the sort of code that you could ever put any sort of load through. So we're now going back through and say, right, let's make it as efficient as we possibly can. Then you stand a chance of being able to productionize it and turn it on for half an hour. And that's the kind of incremental progress we're talking about. Because I think if you start instantly going to nirvana, that's where you start. I think to your point, I think if I picked you up rightly, you could spend 250 grand more training it. To what end? And that's the difficult sell, because too many people have been burnt, and the salaries the MBN guys are talking about, or some of my guys are trying to get poached to get. There's loads of people who've built a big data cluster and it hasn't worked. There's loads of companies who've spent millions and it's sitting there and they're going, so what now? And that's because I think people are trying to do too much. If you try and do the really, really, really simple stuff, which is horribly insulting if you've just done your PhD and you've been doing all these incredible things at university, or you've been a research fellow or whatever, some of the stuff you're then doing in the real world can seem quite dull. But it's small incremental progress. I might be wrong.
I was just going to chain on to that question. Do you feel that it's actually probably easier to get past the regulators as well when it's deterministic as opposed to like a deep neural network where we're not quite sure why it's calling that fraudulent?
Explainability is going to be massive. And I have a particular problem with explainability because I reckon if you went and looked at a SaaS credit risk model, for example, and tried to properly explain what it's doing, I don't think they could. But it's been there for 3-4 decades and everybody trusts it, and it's been signed off every year by the audit committee, and it was built by Dave. Dave's a good guy, so it's not a problem. And then you start talking about essentially using the same sorts of different language, different architecture. It's essentially doing the same thing. And suddenly my DPO are all over me like you would not believe. So we've just changed Data Protection Officer, which was a really bad just around GDPR and just when we started doing our experiments. Because suddenly he's all over, like, what are we doing? I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to start with the basics and just get people comfortable that we know what it's doing, and get people comfortable with not understanding the explainability. It's a nonsense. Like, does anyone actually understand how the insurance models work? Nobody knows how they work, and everybody's like, yeah, well, that's fine. It's just a bit variable, and I'm going to get charged more if I put my car in a garage than on the street. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But everyone just goes, oh well, it's just the expert system, as we used to call them, that's made that up, and that's fine. So I think some of it's quite unfair because it's people who've watched Terminator who are really worried about it. But honestly, I'm a huge believer in just making really, really small incremental, because the regulator's not going to care. And interestingly, we're starting to see, with us moving to Amazon, we were really worried, but FCA are talking about, move to the cloud. People are starting to talk to, regulation is much more comfortable with moving to the cloud. The InfoSec guys are becoming more comfortable with those sorts of concepts that 2 years ago, I tried to put Google BigQuery in, and my InfoSec guy said, no. Those data items, don't care what you do to them, they're not going in the cloud. No. And so it's amazing how much things can change in a few years. If that answers your question, I think.
FCA are a big Amazon user.
Yeah. And you look at the Amazon, which companies do we work with? It'd be easier to say which ones don't we work with. It's not really a big risk. I'm still desperately trying to get us. I don't know if you ever know the snowmobile. So the Amazon snowmobile, a big truck that turns up, takes your data and goes off again, and it's got like helicopters and stuff. It looks, and if you buy it, apparently they give you a Lego model. So I'm desperately trying to push that. We're nowhere near the volumes, but I just want the Lego model. I don't care about anything else. It just seems like such a cool idea. Any other questions? You're up first.
You were talking about like your team kind of prototype things and then moving it into production is kind of like a phased approach. Do your team only focus on like R&D, or do they then get to be involved in the production side of things? Like what's that life cycle like?
So that's a really good question. The question was, my team are involved in a lot of the R&D. Do we get involved in production as well, if I've paraphrased that correctly? Yes, we do, and yes, we can. I don't want big data to be 24/7 operational. That's an absolute nightmare for me, because who do you call? Like, something falls over in the middle of the night. What am I going to call a data engineer? Do I need an architect? Do I need a data scientist? So what we want to try and get to stages where the worst case scenario is we've got a problem on AWS and the data just becomes more aged. So we are trying to work with the production teams to say, it's old school, but let's cache the data somewhere. We'll write the data to somewhere, or we'll use Mongo, or we'll use Exasol, or something like that, to be a little bit of a layer of abstraction to take my team out of the operational loop, because I can't scale it. I can't be on call. My guys can't be on call, because then you need at minimum 4 people, 5 people, blah, 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 blah. There's much more capable teams. So what we're trying to do, where possible, is do the R&D and then embed the smarts into someone else's system. That's the plan. I've tried to mix operational and kind of sandpit environments on big data, and it didn't work for me. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're looking at the moment, is just promoting it to production. The handy side effect is it's more interesting for data scientists as well. So it's more interesting for the team to constantly be working on new stuff rather than supporting old stuff. Does that answer your question? And there's another question there, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking, do people who don't have the standard or conventional technical background, but maybe have a kind of business now and good common sense, does their capacity to understand the problem and the benefits of this kind of experimental approach get stronger and get better, and do they get smarter if it's presented in terms of betting, effectively, in terms of you're not making a yes/no decision, you're making
a probability,
a decision about whether to make a small bet on this, just to change, or whether to make a big bet on this, and you're sort of judging the credibility accordingly. Do people just get smarter and more engaged, or do they get more worried as a result of you raising the issue of, well, this is a risk, everything's a risk?
I think the business people I've worked with are usually, you get to that position usually by being really smart. I'm sure we can find exceptions, but you speak to the really high up people, they can't do everything that people below them can do anyway, so they have to take it on trust. But yeah, I think if you can present it in the right way, as you say, this is a bit of a risk. Everything we do in banking is generally a bit of a risk anyway. A credit model where you get Experian data, anything you do is a gut feel that says that postcode looks bad, don't lend to them. That person looks bad, don't lend to them. Classic example, you've got no credit history. Well, let's just assume you're a bad person. Well, when I met my wife, she was 24 and she'd never had any debt. Still don't quite know how that's possible. But so when she went to buy her house, she couldn't get credit. So we're making mistakes just now, and I think where I'm fortunate, the one kind of slightly sycophantic Clydesdale thing is, where I'm fortunate is we're being given quite a long leash in terms of, no, go and do this stuff, because we need to change. We're talking about being a big challenger bank, we've got the big Virgin deal, we can't stand still, we need to do things differently. So people are more prepared to take a bit of a punt, because everyone else is doing it the more conventional way, so we can't keep doing that. We're not big enough. We have to do things smaller, faster, better. If we make a mistake, we make a mistake. But I think the interesting thing is when you go onto Amazon or eBay and you've got a chatbot is the best example, and it says, I'm in beta. Basically, I'm a bit rubbish. And that's okay. And you don't get away with that as a bank. You can't say, hi, I'm your chatbot to help you manage your account. I'm a bit rubbish just now, but don't worry, I'll get better. It's like, what are you rubbish at? Let me know, because that's you don't have the trust. But I think you can take more risks. I've been surprised at how many more risks I've been allowed to take here than at my previous employer. And you would have thought, looking at the external company, you would think my previous employer would be much more, up for taking risks, and they simply weren't. So I've been speaking a long time. Does anyone else have any other questions? You can get someone more interesting than me. Yeah, perfect.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you.